Thanks for joining us on this Saturday morning. You're listening to Power Talk Radio, 1460 and 101 FM. Louis Alvarez, the CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, joining us for our Saturday chat as we talk about technology. Good morning, Louis.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Doing really well, and yourself?
I am doing terrific.
So what have you got planned for the Father's Day weekend, Louis?
Well, we are going to go out to a little fundraiser out at Poppy Hills that's being put on by Poppy Hills Golf Course on Father's Day that's going to feature the Monterey Jazz Festival All-Star High School Band.
Oh, cool.
And it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $20 per person, and you get to taste some good food, and there's 4 musical acts that will be playing in the afternoon. I think it starts at 2 o'clock, so if you're interested, you'll find me out there with a bunch of my friends, all hopefully celebrating a beautiful day and listening to some terrific music on Father's Day.
Well, David Marzetti was talking about that on the Shag Bag Show because he had Brad Shoup on, who is, I guess, the general manager out there, and they were talking about that promotion, and that's really kind of an interesting thing. Normally, you wouldn't think of a golf course as being the venue for non-golf events. And so I think it's kind of an innovative way of the NCGA coming up with how do we introduce more people to what we have out here at Poppy Hills? Because maybe everybody doesn't become a golfer, but it's the kind of thing where it creates top-of-mind awareness so that somebody comes into town, you have friends with you, and they're, where can I go golf? And quite frankly, maybe they don't want to pay like $500 or $700 for one of the name courses at Pebble Beach, and you can say, hey, we went to this barbecue and music festival at Poppy Hills, which is a golf course in Pebble Beach, and it was pretty cool and looks like it's a beautiful course and so on and so forth. That's kind of a neat marketing tool.
And if you haven't been up to their restaurant up there, it's called Porters in the Forest. To give a plug, I'm not getting paid for this. This is just a community service here. They have a new chef, a guy named Johnny DeVivo, and he came from Casanova and La Bicyclette in Carmel, and he is doing a great job on their menu. It's an amazing experience. Their food is terrific. So if you're looking for some place to go new and experiencing something that you haven't before, I'd highly encourage you to check out Porters in the Forest. And they will be providing some of the food on Sunday, as well as the chef from La Bolena, which is another restaurant in Carmel that people love. So a great experience if you want to come join me on Sunday.
And by the way, you don't have to be a member of the NCGA, the Northern California Golf Association, to be able to eat at that restaurant.
Absolutely. You can just show up for lunch or dinner anytime.
So the other day we were talking about password security, that's the big thing these days.
Yep.
And that's going to be the big thing in 2015 because we're hearing about LastPass being hacked. We're hearing about the Chinese developing apps that can hack passwords. So, Louis, what are some of the things that the average person can do to protect themselves from password hack?
The number one thing that people can do is use complex passwords. One of the things that I fault many websites for is that they let people use very simple passwords, even password. You'd be surprised at how many times password 123 or ABC 123 is somebody's password. And we think of it in terms of, well, why do I want to remember something really complicated? But if you make it too easy, then it's very easy to hack. And so the first thing you should do is whenever you create a password, use a series of complex letters and numbers and even special characters if it's allowed. So it's not really tough when you think about it. If you think about your address, for example, and you just say, like, for example, 209 Pajaro, which is our building's address. I can say 209 Pajaro and change a couple of those to capital letters and special characters, and poof, I have a password that's virtually unbreakable but easily memorable for me. So first piece of advice is use complex passwords. Secondly is don't use the same password over and over and over again. A lot of people will just stick to one password for everything that they do, and by and large, most websites now default to your email address as your user ID. So if somebody has your email address, they have half of the combination they need to break into any of your accounts. So if you're using simple passwords or you're using the same password, once they hack it there, they can get into anything that you want. And the last thing is we want to write things down and make sure that we have it handy in case we forget. Our memories aren't what they used to be. But if you're going to write down your passwords, make sure you store them someplace secure, either on your computer with its own password, or if you're going to write it in paper, make sure you lock that thing in a file cabinet someplace and you don't make it easily accessible.
Let me ask you a couple things. Sometimes when you go on a site and you're putting in, they ask you to put in your password, and it'll give like a security strength. And you might get like the first one you try, it says poor and then fair and then good and excellent. How valid are those ratings?
They're very valid for that site. It depends on the encryption key that site is using. Some of them will use 256K encryption keys, others 128K. Other ones will use other algorithms. So it depends on the algorithm, but what it's doing is it's comparing your password and the combination of characters that you use to what it thinks it would take to break that password using state-of-the-art computers. And when it says strong, it's assuming that it's going to take more than a machine year, if you think about it, a computer running for a year to break that password, trying billions of iterations of hacks. Whereas weak means that it would take less than a day to break that password.
And what about the quality of VPN connections? I know that here at the radio station we have a VPN system so that we can access the internal operations of the computers that actually run the programming on the station and edit and so forth. Is VPN, having a virtual private network, is that a pretty secure kind of gateway?
It is. In fact, a virtual private network, which is what we're talking about, is essentially a tunnel, an encrypted tunnel that's created between two endpoints on the internet. And when you encrypt a tunnel, you have a key, basically yet again another series of characters that are unique to that tunnel. So unless you can capture enough packets along that VPN tunnel to basically backwards engineer that particular key, it's impossible to break into the data that's being transmitted via that VPN tunnel. And because of the way that the internet works, where packets are spread throughout the entire network and then put back together again at the endpoint, the only way you could really do that successfully is if you essentially have what's called a sniffer sitting right at one of the two ends of that particular tunnel, in which case it would be a very visible device sitting on your network. So it's not something that's easily done.
And Louis, if I'm using my laptop, I go into a store or like a restaurant, a coffee shop, and they offer free Wi-Fi, and some of them will actually have a password that you have to use to get on it. How secure is their network going to be from someone making an incursion into my computer?
Well, that's a great question. Most people that connect up to public Wi-Fi networks need to understand that you're connecting to essentially a network that makes you visible to everybody else that's connected to that network. So anything that you transmit while you're connected can easily be intercepted by anybody else that's sitting in that same coffee shop or in that same airline waiting area or wherever you happen to find yourself connected to the internet. So I recommend that people actually subscribe to and pay for a VPN service that will encrypt that communications when you are on open networks, which is more and more what's being supplied out there publicly. You can go pretty much everywhere and find an open internet connection available, Wi-Fi connection available for use. So you have to protect yourself, because if you don't know what you're doing, somebody just sitting right there next to you could be trying to get into your system and break into your data.
Okay, so you got to be very careful about that. And even if they say that they have, is it WEP2? Is that the thing that's the latest and greatest now?
WPA2. WEP is the old encryption standard that has been obsolete for quite a long time. WPA TKP2 is the new standard that is still considered to be virtually unbreakable.
If somebody has a router, a Wi-Fi router in their business, and they're listening to us, and they're offering free Wi-Fi to their customers, and they're using the old WEP2 thing, they want to upgrade to this new encryption method, right?
To WPA, absolutely.
How do they find that? Is that something that is automatically offered through their router, or where would you access that?
If you've bought a wireless router or wireless access point in the last, I'd say, 5 years, and you're going to find WPA2 available. If it's older than that, there's probably a possibility that you can download an upgraded firmware. You just need to go to that vendor site. If you have a Belkin or Netgear or something like that, chances are that they're going to have firmware that will upgrade your device to support WPA.
Good to know. Let's see, a couple other things to mention to you here. Samsung apparently has a massive security flaw in one of their devices. Security researchers just revealed a huge vulnerability in Samsung smartphones that puts hundreds of millions of devices at risk of an attack that could compromise personal data, including phone calls that are stored on the device. What do you know about this?
Supposedly, they're going to be sending out an app fix to repair that problem, and it's going to be out here pretty quick. But it's something that somebody discovered and brought to Samsung's attention, and Samsung publicly acknowledged that there is an issue, so that they're going to be addressing it. And if you have a Samsung device, it's kind of hard for me to say for some reason, if you have a Samsung device, look out for that update, which will fix this vulnerability.
And then also another story to mention to you. This happened on Wednesday. AT&T got hit with a $100 million fine after slowing down its unlimited data plan for a number of users.
Mm-hmm. We've been complaining for years that, and this is actually why the whole net neutrality thing happened, because the companies that were out there, the ISPs were saying that they weren't taking those kind of actions, that they, people paid for a certain speed, they got that speed regardless of how much data they transmitted. But the reality is that the ISPs, in particular AT&T and Verizon, have been throttling back heavy users of the internet so that they basically will function slower, because according to AT&T and Verizon, look, these guys, everybody should be using the internet the same, and if somebody uses it more, they should pay more. But that's not the way that their service agreements read, so the government slapped them with a fine saying, hey, you can't throttle anybody unless you tell them that you're going to throttle them, and then let them make an informed decision. Do they want your service knowing that they're going to be throttled, or will they go with somebody else? And because then it becomes a competitive advantage, right? If you have Sprint or somebody else out there saying, no, we won't do what AT&T is doing, then they can potentially steal some customers from AT&T. So it's kind of a fairness thing, and I'm glad that AT&T was, in their case, the fine is a slap on the wrist, given what we're talking about. But it's still enough to send a message to the rest of the community that if you're going to be throttling, you got to make it public.
Hey, last thing to talk about here. We had mentioned it on Monday, kind of laughing about it in passing, but it's about that hack in the baseball world where the St. Louis Cardinals are accused of hacking into the computer network of the Houston Astros as a way of gaining information about the Astros. And there was a story that ran in Friday's edition of the Houston Chronicle. Now, the story came out of Denver, and it says Thursday's tacit admission by the Cardinals ownership that someone in the organization was involved in hacking the Houston Astros was only an early step in bringing to light a saga that's expected to prove more shocking once the FBI has completed its investigation and all the details are released. Hey, they've gone beyond baseball umpires in the commissioner's office. They've gone right to the FBI.
Well, I was going to say, it went across state lines, so technically it is a violation of federal law, and the FBI takes this sort of stuff seriously, especially in today's environment where hacking is becoming all too common, and in sports where it seems like you hear about one cheating scandal after another. And with technology getting involved, I'm not surprised that we finally have our first cheating scandal that involves technology. I'm just surprised it's the St. Louis Cardinals, because they seem to be such a successful story. Then why would they have to hack anybody?
Well, maybe that's why. You never know.
Yeah,
but
never know.
The Houston Chronicle learned Thursday that Cardinals had unauthorized access to the Astros information as early as 2012, a year earlier than was previously known. Now, Cardinals owner Bill DeWitt Jr. for the first time acknowledged that his organization had played a role in accessing proprietary information belonging to the Astros. He blamed it on roguish behavior. Meeting with reporters in St. Louis Thursday, DeWitt said his own organization's investigation was still ongoing, did not specify which employee or employees were responsible, but told club workers on Thursday, we've all been tainted. Wow.
Yeah. I think there's more to this story than we're hearing right now. The fact that usually you'll see these sports teams, the ownership group will come out vehemently denying any sort of nefarious activity took place. The fact that they're admitting to it so early, it tells me that there's more bombshells coming, and they kind of want to lay the groundwork for that expectation that there's more to come, and we're sorry that it happened.
If you really want to see some great information on this, I'd recommend going to chron.com, CHRON.com. That's the Houston Chronicle. And then the St. Louis Dispatch has a lot of stories about this. Those two cities, news organizations in Houston and St. Louis, are really digging down deep in this story. So you get some good information there, because this is really a kind of a fascinating story that's going on. And one, like you said, was inevitable that we would eventually see this kind of a thing going on. And hey, this isn't the first time this kind of thing has happened in the world of sports, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the football team, the New England Patriots, have been accused of cheating over the years. Let's not forget that Don Shula, the iconic former coach of the Miami Dolphins, many years ago, when he was still involved in professional football as a coach, he referred to the Patriots coach, Bill Belichick. He used to call him Bill Belicheat.
Yeah.
So apparently there's that old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. But this is something, I think that there's always been cheating in professional sports. People are always looking for one way or another to gain an advantage. And this is just another example of of it. But this, like you say, it could be very, very serious because you're dealing with a crime that crosses state lines, and then it becomes a federal issue. And boy, once the feds get in charge, this has left the purview of the commissioner's office, right? If it's solely a baseball matter, right? The commissioner can get together with the owners and the other people involved in this, and they can come up with some sort of agreement, some sort of gentleman's agreement or sanctions or what have you. But, when you get the Justice Department, you get indictments and you get a trial, and people can sometimes go to jail.
What do they say? It ain't cheating unless you get caught, right? So...
You're right about that. All right. Well, Luis Alvarez has been our guest this morning. He is the CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group. And Luis, for our listeners that want to get in touch with the I-Team, what do they need to do?
Well, you can find us on the web at alvareztg.com or follow us on Twitter at AlvarezTG. We're also on Facebook. You can look for facebook.com/AlvarezTG. And finally, if you just want to pick up the phone and give us a call, feel free to call at 866-78-I-TEAM. That's 866-784-8326.
All right, Luis, thanks so much for joining us. Have a happy Father's Day tomorrow, and enjoy the music and the barbecue at Pebble Beach.
Thank you, my friend. You have a great weekend, too. My friend, you have a great weekend, too. My friend, you have a great weekend, too. My friend, you have a great weekend, too.